Well, good afternoon everybody, it's Phil here again, and it's a lovely afternoon, and I'm in the southwest of England in the county of Somerset. Now I know I say my walks are in Devon, but I've just sneaked slightly over the border for this one, and I didn't bring my passport, so I've got to be a bit careful, but I had my COVID mask on when I was going over the border. So this is the Old Towpath, and I'm heading towards the NYNEHEAD boat lift, and in fact the Bridgewater and Taunton Canal was originally planned to meet up with the Great Western Canal, which is the canal walk that I did when I first started doing these. So I am 13-14 miles or so north of the Great Western Canal, and as you can see now looking back, it's very tranquil and beautiful, but the water is completely stagnant, and the wildlife is thriving in the sediment. You can see that originally this was a serious waterway, and as we come up to this plaque you can see the serious construction that went on here to make this a navigable waterway for taking barges and boats down this waterway. So on this plaque you can see it says the lifts of the Grand Western Canal, and I've just shown you the brickworks and the stonework that supported these structures. You can see it says the NYNEHEAD lift. The remains of the NYNEHEAD lift are of historical significance, as it's the only one of 7 built that includes a substantial amount of masonry. The lifts were built in the 1830s and were certainly the first in Britain and probably the world. For it to be commercially successful and operating for nearly 30 years under the canal, until the canal was closed by the Bristol and Exeter Railway Company. In their day they were in the forefront of technology, and one has to respect the courage and imagination of the engineer James Green and the proprietors for the building mechanisms when materials technology and iron founding were in their infancy. So you can see here a little bit of a diagram of how it worked. I'm not an engineer, but it looks like it was basically a counterweight system, and the counterweight system then lifted the boat from the lower elevation up to the higher pond, the upper pond. So there would have been a lock gate at the bottom, and then the counterweights would have come into action and lifted the boat to the higher level, and then the lock gates at the top would have opened and the boat would have then carried on its journey. It's absolutely amazing, really, the engineering involved in doing this. So we're going to go a bit further and see what else we can discover on this part of the walk. So as I go up this incline, you can see the elevation here of the height that the boats would have been lifted to bring them up to this height. It's absolutely incredible. And here you can see, I presume, what would have been the canal continuing on from here. This lady who I've met just 10 minutes ago, who has a lot more knowledge than me, is explaining how this configuration worked.
So this would have been the driveway, I'm led to believe, for NYNEHEAD Court. They come in through the gates there, come underneath the bridge, underneath the canal, and then down through the fields here, where they've planted all these new trees. You'd then follow it around to the right, and NYNEHEAD Court is nestled just over there.
Fantastic. So I'm quite a ways south now from the NYNEHEAD boat lift, and I'm heading now down towards LOWDWELL lock, and I'm just stopping here because you can see just the kind of remnants of the canal. But as I get further towards the lock, there are one or two expanses and stretches that show where the lock was, and there's even one or two spots where there's still some water. So coming up on the left here, you can just see an absolute carpet of primroses. Absolutely lovely. Nature never disappoints, does it? So the canal would have been on my left. It's kind of a bit of a raised bank there at the moment, and it was filled in, and it's now referred to as the dry section, although it's not dry in all places. Wow, more primroses. It's almost as if a loving gardener has planted them. Here again you can see the direction of the canal here. There's a dip here and there's quite a bit of standing water, and if you look down through you can see it's going in a pretty well a straight line. So here again we've got some water, and you can clearly see again the direction of the canal, and nature seems to have reclaimed it for itself. And as you look through there, it's almost like it's a kind of a mangrove swamp in many ways. It's got that kind of look to it. So I'm going to carry on along here, and there's some lovely geomancy. Look at this little arch here made by this tree trunk. That's quite something, isn't it? Like a natural arch. Amazing. So we're going to carry on here for a bit and see what we find next. heading ever closer to LOWDWELL Lock, down fairly narrow path here at the moment, but here on the right you can see again some water and a little piece of the old canal, and the people who live in the house just to my right have a little float around from time to time in the summer. It must be quite nice. So again, evidence of the canal and the heritage of the canal system in the UK. And I'm not sure where the towpath was. It was either this side. It looks like it was more likely to have been the other side. It's hard to say. Everything's so overgrown now. Nature's kind of taking it back. It's so overgrown. But again, down there you can see the water, but there's brambles everywhere. And I'm continuing along on this footpath with the canal now way below me on my right instead of on my left. And what have we got here? Oh, someone has very kindly put some log cuts down here to help us get across this pretty wet patch, and it is wet. Thank you to them. And there's some more here. I've got a guitar piece of mine. It was one of the first pieces I ever wrote, called A Muddy Puddle, and we certainly have that. Now I'm just about to go around this corner. If you can see through all the trees and the foliage, etc., there's a bridge there, and let's have a look. We can see if we get a better view of it from the other side. And yes, it is a bridge over the canal, and here we are. Here it is. And taking a closer look at this bridge, it's kind of looking a little bit in disrepair now. I imagine it will eventually collapse, but you get some idea again of the canal and the effort, and the building and infrastructure was put in place to get this canal from the Taunton and Bridgewater Canal and link it down through to the Great Western Canal, which we're heading now to LOWDWELL Lock to show you. So, still trying to track the direction and course of this canal, the dry section as they say. I'm still trying to fathom it out, excuse the pun, but I think this is part of it, and it certainly is dry. It looks like it could have been filled in, but I'm not actually sure. As we get up to this tree, you can kind of see another wet section continuing on from here. So here I'm on the other side of that tree, and you can see it continues on down there, and I can't walk down there because it's just too wet at the moment. So I'm going to skirt around to the right and pick it up a bit further down. Here we are again, looking back up, and as I pan round, looking back down again. So you can clearly see this is the path of the canal. So we're not far from the lock now, I think. On the left here, it looks like this is rabbit territory. Something was built there, I'm not sure what that is. Yeah, it's kind of a spring. Yeah, it's a spring, and quite a few entrances to rabbit homes. Primary real estate for the rabbits along here. Holes everywhere. They must have heard me coming. So I finally arrived at the lock, and this is exactly where the canal finishes. The tugboat narrow section of the canal came all the way down from Taunton and hooked up to the Great Western Canal, which goes on from here another 11.5 miles. And as I come up to it, you can see some of the masonry, the brickwork, and presumably the tugboats came in here somewhere, and then the water levels were changed and they were lifted through a lock mechanism. Although, as I said, there's 7 boat lifts on this northern part of the canal to do that job, but here they have a lock, and here it is, what's left of it. And it empties into the Great Western Canal, which is much wider, as you can see. So the tugboats then empty into the Great Western Canal and on down to Tiffin to the lime kilns. So we're looking at an information board here at LOWDWELL Lock, and what lies here are the remains. And it was a staging point on the journey to or from Taunton, where the Grand Western connected to the Bridgewater and Taunton Canal. And the broad canal probably ended at the Waytown lime kilns, about 700 metres closer to Tiverton than the lock. It was probably Green, who was the engineer at the time, who cut the mixed gauge section through the Waytown tunnel to this point, where he then built the 61 foot by 15 lock with a 3.5 foot rise capable of passing 4 tugboats at once. So from here the route to Taunton then crossed an aqueduct over the nearby road. The road marks the end of the Grand Western Canal, and the tugboat canal as it's called, was abandoned in the 1860s, and from this point you can trace the former route of the tugboat canal for 5.5 miles to the remains of NYNEHEAD Lift near Wellington, which is where we've been a little bit earlier on this walk. And so the remains of the lift are well studied and interpretation panels are provided. That's the ones we've looked at already. So this is the lock, and there's really not much left to see of it. It's kind of sad, really. You can see where the canal went from here, and you can see quite a lot of stonework and masonry. Must have been quite impressive coming down through and then coming through this lock. And again, you can see the stonework and the masonry where the lock was, and from this point you can see where the actual canal gets wider. So up to this point it was only wide enough for these tugboats to get through. So we're looking at a canal that was this width, going another 13.5 miles up to Taunton, and just carrying cargo on these tugboats, which were able to carry about 8 tons worth of limestone and coal, etc. And then from this point onwards it's another 11.25 miles down to Tiverton, where the lime kilns are situated. And if you've already looked at my Great Western Canal Walk number 1, then the history of the lime kilns and the remnants of them are down to be seen at the basin at the very bottom, at the very end of the canal. So this is LOWDWELL Lock. Kind of a testimony to bygone days and England's industrial heritage. So I'm going to finish the walk now with just a short walk down this very top part of the Great Western Canal. Just a couple of features here to finish the walk with, and that will complete this walk, featuring the NYNEHEAD boat lift, LOWDWELL Lock, cackling chickens, and a little tunnel up ahead through which the tugboats went, I believe. Even the canal up here is very shallow. I'm not sure, again, my few gaps in my research here, but what they did in the 1800s to keep these canals from silting up, so they became unnavigable. I'm not sure, some sort of dredging. If I can find out how they did that, I'll put a link if there's any to that information in the description box below. And while we're talking about description boxes, a couple of swans coming up on the left here, kind of idyllic. I left my swan food behind, but they've got lots of algae and nutrient-rich water-borne plants to keep them healthy. They certainly look healthy. It's particularly lovely along here, and being late March, we're just given wonderful displays of primroses and daffodils and buttercups. So if you've enjoyed this walk and you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do. And if you think anybody else would like my content, my rather quirky style, then share the link and get them to subscribe, and that would be great. This is the last time I'm going to be probably doing anything to do with canals, as my first walk was Canal Walk at the very end of this canal, about 11 miles south of here. But I've got some interesting walks planned, which won't just include history and buildings and canals, but moorland, coastal, and some sacred sites and some spiritual places as well, which I'm looking forward to doing. And hopefully, well, not hopefully, absolutely, certainly, I will be featuring more of my kind of soundscape, ambient, eclectic music. So on the left here is a splendid house called the Wharf, and I imagine when the canal was working, it was a working wharf and was used to store materials, kind of a staging post. I'm not sure what they use wharfs for, possibly boat repair, barge repair, that kind of thing. But it is absolutely beautifully restored, and now it's a really grand private house. So the canal continues on, really quite a long way down now, on my left. I seem to have been on the left of it, the right of it, all the way through this walk. And the last feature to show you, coming up, you might be able to see it better from the other side, but I'll try and get closer. There is a tunnel, and the tugboats went through that, and So it's under a bridge, you can hear the traffic going across the bridge, and so they had to build a tunnel underneath the bridge to let these tugboats and barges through. I'm just going to scoot down, drop down the other side of the bridge and let you see the tunnel from the other side, and then we're done. Oh, now you can see it. Well, I've actually scrambled down. Look at that. Lucky to catch that bird after planing along the surface of the canal. I've actually come down here, and I've brave enough to lean out and try and give you a view down the tunnel, and you can see it's not that long, it's quite narrow, and it's a lovely feature. So I'd like to thank you all for watching today, and I hope you've enjoyed this second canal walk, and see you next time.